Howdy everyone, it's Sam. Hope you're all doing really well. If you're new around here, hope I can get you to consider liking the content and subscribing to the channel. And if you are a regular around these here parts, thank you very much for the continuous support. The Canberra Raiders 2023 draw has come under a little bit of fire because a lot of people, a lot of experts and pundits believe that they have the easiest draw for 2023. I'm just going to put my hand up and have a look at this one. So let's have a look at the Raiders 2023 draw. As always, I'm going to look at 5 games, sectioning them off. And how do the Canberra Raiders start their season? They start with a back-to-back away fixture in Queensland. Game number 1, Saturday, 5:30 p.m. in New South Wales. Cowboys versus the Canberra Raiders at Queensland Country Bank Stadium. Both these sides featured in the finals last season. Both these sides have featured against each other in round 1 on 2 other occasions since 2014, and the score margin was less than 6 points. What a thrilling and awesome way to start the campaign for both of these clubs. Yes, I'd probably like to face the Dragons in round number 1, but I'm always going to have a soft spot for the Canberra Raider lads. Round number 2, they don't leave the state of Queensland. They are going to be the Redcliffe Dolphins' second ever opponent in first grade. They are going to be Redcliffe's first ever opponent at KO Stadium in Moreton Bay. So the Canberra Raiders face the Dolphins at Moreton Bay Stadium, or the old Moreton Daily Stadium, now known as KO Stadium. That's going to be tricky to get used to. Got to do that quickly. That game is taking place Saturday, 4:30 p.m. Queensland time. Cowboys, Dolphins for the Raiders in Queensland for the first 2 weeks in a row. Round number 3, they host the Cronulla Sutherland Sharks for a Sunday twilight fixture, and this I can't classify it as a rivalry, but man, there's some bad blood and some long running history between these two clubs. They then hit the road again for a Channel 9 Sunday afternoon affair against the Newcastle Knights up there at McDonald Jones Stadium in round number 4. And then to round out their first section of 2023, a home game against the Penrith Panthers, Friday, 6 p.m. kickoff. To nutshell it all for the Canberra Raiders inside their first 5 rounds, they're away to the Cowboys, the Dolphins, and the Knights. Besides the Cowboys, those 2 away trips could provide plenty of richness and fruitfulness for them. I sound like I'm talking about a friggin' smoothie recipe, fair dinkum. And their 2 home games inside that first 5 rounds are against the Cronulla Sharks and the Penrith Panthers. I'd say 3 out of 5. The strength of opposition is actually quite difficult for the Canberra Raiders, considering where all clubs finished in 2022. So it's not a smooth and easy start to the season, in my opinion, for the Canberra Raiders. Section number 2 starts with a 3rd trip to the Sunshine State to take on the Brisbane Broncos up at Suncorp Stadium, a Saturday 7:30 fixture. That should be at least 30,000 at very least. There's a lot of Raiders fans up here in Queensland, I've found. So that's how they start their second section. Then they're back home at GIO Stadium against the St. George Illawarra Dragons for a Sunday 2 o'clock game. Then they have their first bye of 2023, and that comes in round number 8. And they do not have to leave close quarters, as it were, because they have their home game against the Dragons. They have a bye, and they've been selected to have, or they have selected to choose to take one of their home games down to McDonald's Park in Wagga Wagga in round number 9. So they travel a little bit further south of the ACT borderline or state line. Borderline. So they take on the Dolphins Saturday 3 p.m. in round 9 down at Wagga Wagga. And then in round 10, it's Magic Round, and they have the honours of being a part of the first fixture, the first game of that weekend. They are technically the away side. They're taking on the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs Friday 6 p.m. Friday 6 p.m. against the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. And so the Raiders travel to Queensland 4 times inside the first 10 rounds of the 2023 season. They also have a unique trip down to Wagga Wagga. So I reckon if they can go, what would you say? 3 and or 2-1, 3-1 inside Section 2. I reckon they take that, the Raiders. Section 3, 2023 starts with back-to-back home games, and number 1 is against the Parramatta Eels at GAO Stadium, Saturday 7:30 p.m, followed by a Channel 9 Sunday afternoon game against the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles in round number 12. In round 13, the Origin Stars are out, and they are away to the South Sydney Rabbitohs at Accor Stadium for a Saturday 7:30 p.m. game. That could get a nice crowd out there at Sydney Olympic Park. And I think they're a shot in that game. Yeah, they're going to lose a few of their own, but I think they're actually a genuine shot in that game against the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Round number 14, they are still on the road, and they take on the West Tigers on a Friday night Channel 9 game, the first NRL game after State of Origin game number 1 out at Campbelltown Sports Stadium. So who knows who's going to back up after State of Origin? Will Api Coruscant be selected for the West Tigers, for example, and will he back up, for example? And then to finish off their third section for 2023, they host the New Zealand Warriors Friday, 6 p.m. at GIO Stadium. And the last few encounters between the Raiders and the Warriors have been just wild, bro. Just absolutely wild. Section 3, 2023, that they are away to South Sydney and the West Tigers. As far as when the Origin period has started up, but they host the Warriors, they host Manly, they do host Parramatta. So again, if they can go 2-3 or even 3-2, I think they can take that, bro. The Raiders then have their second of 3 buys for 2023 to begin Section 4 of their campaign in round number 16. So they have a really long layoff, and their first game back after their second bye is a trip for their first ever game at Allianz Stadium to take on the Eastern Suburbs for a Sunday twilight fixture. And in that one, will be interesting to see if Origin Stars will be selected to play in that game. They're then back at home against the Gold Coast Titans for a Saturday 3 p.m. fixture. That should be a golden day if it's not miserable down there in Canberra in the middle of winter. And then they're back on the road again for a Friday night Channel 9 game at Wynn Stadium in Wollongong. The St. George Illawarra Dragons host the Canberra Raiders in round 19 in Wollongong. And then they finish their fourth section, round number 20, with a bye. So their fourth section has 2 buys. Yeah, they're up against the Sydney Roosters, but the Roosters themselves could and probably will be Origin affected. They host the Titans, they're away to the Dragons, and that'll also be a game where I think players will be fighting for Origin jerseys as well, or even they may have already been plucked by then, but that's when fatigue starts. But that fourth section there, I think there's going to be a lot of points coming their way inside Section 4 of the 2023 campaign for the Canberra Raiders. So if the Raiders are sitting on the precipice come the run to the finals, which start in round 21 by my calculations anyway, or in my opinion, what does their run to the finals look like? So in round 21, they have a trip across the ditch to take on the New Zealand Warriors Friday 6 p.m. So a Friday night game over in Auckland at Mount Smart Stadium. That, I imagine, would be their first New Zealand game in 3+ years. So that'll be an occasion, and there's plenty of Raiders fans over there in New Zealand. They're then back home against the Newcastle Knights Saturday 3 p.m. Followed by they are then back home for 2 straight home games against the Newcastle Knights and the West Tigers. The Newcastle Knights game, Saturday, 3 p.m. And then the West Tigers is a Channel 9 Sunday afternoon game down there at GIO Stadium, Canberra. They then hit the road to take on arguably their biggest rivals in the Melbourne Storm. They travel down to Amy Park to take them on Sunday, 2 o'clock. Unfortunately, it's not a free to air game, which is very, very surprising. Round 25, they host the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, Channel 9 Sunday afternoon game. And then to round out their final two fixtures of the year, one home game against the Brisbane Broncos and their final one, and that's a Saturday 7:30 game, and that's going to be aired on Channel 9 free to air. So that's a good win for the Canberra Raiders. And then to round it out, they have the honour of being in the final home and away regular season match. They are away to the Cronulla Sutherland Sharks for a Channel 9 Sunday afternoon game out at PointsBet Stadium. And considering the form, or based off the form of 2022, that could be a win and in situation, either into the top 8 or even the top 4. Who knows? But that's a huge way to finish the fixture for the home and away fixtures anyway. So from round 21, they take on the Warriors, Knights, the Tigers, Melbourne Storm at Amy Park. They host the Bulldogs, who could provide a challenge or two. They host the Brisbane Broncos, who will be thereabouts in the top 8 fight. And then they're away to the Cronulla Sharks. That run to the finals could bear some fruit for them, especially in the early portion of it. But yeah, it's not. I don't think it's the easiest draw. I don't. That might be controversial, and you might think I'm wrong, but in my opinion, man, they've got 4 or 5 trips to the Sunshine State inside the first 10 rounds of the season. They've got the Sharkies twice. They've got Penrith on in the early rounds. I reckon that their start to the season is actually a little difficult, just with the amount of traveling that they got to do. But then it sort of dries up in the second half of their campaign, and then they have a blockbuster against the Sharks, Channel 9 Sunday afternoon game in that final round of the season. Yeah, I don't think it's the easiest draw. I don't think it crosses halfway, but I don't think it's the easiest draw, in my opinion. I'd have to just sit back down and reevaluate and I guess do a rankings video in the next couple of days. Guys, thank you very much for the continuous support. That's my overlook video for the Canberra Raiders. Only 2 more to go, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Adios.